Okay, so now I want to make it so this thing in the nav bar tells us how many messages we have. So to do that, we're going to have an API route that we hit that will basically count the unread messages and send it back. So in the app API folder, we're going to go to messages and we're going to create a new folder called unread-count. And then we're going to create a file in there called route.js. Okay, and then I'm just going to copy from one of these other ones, I guess from the message ID route.js. Let's see, is there a get request here? No, because we're not getting single. I guess I'll just copy the put and the imports. And then let's paste that in here. So we do need all three of these, the ConnectDB, the message model, and get session user. We're going to keep this export, and then let's change these to get, and it's going to be for the route API/messages/ unread-count. Okay, so we want to get the database or connect to the database. We want to, we don't need this, okay, because we're not getting an ID from the params, so we don't need to pass this in. We do want the session user, so all that is going to stay the same. And then I guess we can just get rid of the rest of this. We'll keep the response, we'll change that in a second. We can also keep this the same. But under the user ID, let's say const unread messages and set that to await message uppercase M. And there's a function that we can use, or a method we can use called count documents. So that's what we want. We want to count documents and then pass in basically our condition, which is going to be the recipient should be the user ID. Okay, so we want just that user's message, and we also want where read is false. All right, so that will give us the unread message. Let's call this unread message count, because we don't need the actual messages, we just need the count. And then we're simply going to return, let's say JSON stringify, and then we'll have an object, and let's say count, and set that to unread message count. All right, yeah, so that should do it. Let's save that. Now we need to go to the nav bar because that's where we're displaying this. So let's open up the components and then the nav bar. Okay. Now initially I was going to put the functionality for this directly in the nav bar. In fact, that's what I have in the documentation right now for traversymedia.com. But I think putting this in a separate component would be a good idea because we have a lot in this nav bar. So let's try that out, and I'll most likely update it in the documentation. So let's go to components. Let's create a new file. We'll call this unread message count.js, JSX. And let's say RAFCE. And then what I want to do is in the nav bar, we need to find where that number is, that 2 that's being displayed. We need that and the element around it. So that is right here. So it says replace actual number. So what I'll do is, excuse me, I'm going to grab the span that's around that 2, and I'm going to cut that, and then put that in this unread messages count. Okay, I'll save that. Then I want to embed that here. Of course, I need to bring it in, but this is going to be unread message count. That should have just auto imported. Let's make sure. Yep, so that's bringing it in right here. I'll just keep it there. That's fine. So let's save that, and now we should still see the 2, but now this is in its own component. Now in that component, we're going to add some state. So we need to do a couple things. We need to say use client, and then we're going to import use state from React, and we might as well bring in use effect as well. Actually, we'll hold off on that. So useState, then let's go into the function here and let's add in a piece of state. So this is going to be unread message count, and then set, well, let's just call it unread because I don't want it the same name as the function. So we'll just call this unread, and then we'll say set unread or unread count. Let's do that. All right, so set that. Let's say use state, and the default is going to be 0. And then what we want to do is show that instead of this 2 right here, and I'll get rid of this comment as well. We then want to say unread count, save that, and now it should be 0. And then all we have to do to show the number is make a request to that route that we just created. So yeah, we are going to do a use effect here. And then let's add that here. We'll say, actually, let's go below the state here. Use effect. All right, and then just pass in our dependency array, and we're going to pass in, actually, we don't need to pass anything in here. So in use effect, actually, you know what? We do want to check for the session. So why don't we do this? Why don't we pass in, because we have the session available in the nav bar. So let's go down to where we have unread messages count, and let's add in the session. Pass that in as a prop, and then here, session, and then in the use effect, we'll say if no session, then let's just return. All right, then we want to make our requests, so const res, and set that to await fetch, and of course we need to put this into a function. So let's create a function here, const fetch unread messages, set that to an asynchronous function, and then we want to take this try catch, and we want to move that into the function. And let's make sure that we call the function as well. All right, so back up here in the fetch, this is going to be the route that we just created, so API slash messages slash unread dash count, or unread dash count. Okay, then let's check the status. So if the res dot status is 200, then we're going to get the data. So const data from await res dot JSON, and then let's set the unread count. We'll set that to data, and then it's count, right? We could, let me just go back to that route. Messages, where is it? API, messages, unread count. So we could call this count, and then instead of doing this, just pass in count. Yeah, we could, and then just get rid of the curly braces around it so that the response is the actual count. And then here, instead of data.count, we can just do data. So that should work. And then let's see, in the catch, we'll just do console log and show the error. So let's try that out. We'll save that, and now it says 1. Now, if I don't have any, like let's mark this as red as well, and it doesn't change right away, we're going to get into that in the next video by adding context, but if I reload the page, it will show 0 now that we have none. But I don't want it to show 0. I just don't want it to show at all if we don't have any new messages. And also, we need to pass in, since we're using session in the use effect, we want to pass that in as a dependency array, dependency object here. But yeah, to not show that, what we can do is return, and then right here, we're just going to say unread count. If that is greater than 0, then we want to show this. So let's save that. And now that goes away because there are no new messages. If I mark one as new and I reload, now we see 1. Okay, but like I said, if we mark it as new and we don't reload, it doesn't show. And I want that to update automatically. So we're going to get into something we haven't done yet, and that is using context, because we need that to be a global piece of state so that the navbar can then get the changes from that global state and show it right away. So we'll do that in the next video.